That's all I am to you.
Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain.
Yeah, he's the one pulling the strings, let's be clear.
Do not look over there. That's great. I think, thanks, bud. I think we're now live, and welcome to kind of a different setup for us tonight. We're going to be looking at the sonnets, and I wanted to work with these four amazing actors that have been in a number of shows, and GT, this is your, I guess, your second show with us now, so welcome. That's very exciting. And Alana and Luann and Paul have been with us since the very beginning, and we wanted to do a really kind of informal look at Shakespeare's sonnets. I know that they're getting a lot of traction worldwide. Sir Patrick Stewart does one every day and has been doing one since we've been in quarantine, and they're great. But I wanted to put it to actors and how we look at these sonnets as tools, perhaps, as possibilities to, use as for audition pieces or not. Can we start that conversation? And I think that that's where we'll begin tonight. I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of a brief sonnet lesson. And for me, when I was introduced to the sonnets, and I'll ask everybody after I've introduced the sort of my experiences. The sonnets were the high art, were the sonnets, you can't look at the sonnets, and I hated them when I first met them. I was so intimidated by them and so frustrated by them because they were put on this sort of plinth and, this pedestal, and it was, you had to sort of kneel down and you weren't worthy, and it was so frustrating for me because I felt like the love that I had for Shakespeare's plays, how could it be any different in his sonnets? And I figured that wasn't necessarily the case. So I kind of dug around the sonnets a little bit more, and I started to find out that there was a lot of rich material there. Just briefly, 1609, they're printed during Shakespeare's lifetime. We don't know if they were stolen or if there was some sort of subterfuge on how Thomas Thorpe, a book publisher at the time, gets them and publishes them. And we know that Shakespeare had seen some of his plays, published beforehand, but the sonnets seem to be something that, were for a very specific kind of reason, perhaps. But I don't know. I wrestle with this. Before we dig in, what do you guys think? GT, why don't you start us off? How did you come to learn about the sonnets, to know about the sonnets?
I learned it in drama school. I had never heard of the sonnets prior to drama school, to be quite honest. And we used them in voice class, actually. And I believe, I don't know the reason why, but a lot of it was, aside from the language and the richness of it, we didn't know it, most of us. We just, were these fresh young kids, and we just didn't know it. And it was great to learn it. I think we all, it wasn't like we took it home. He gave us one in class, and, we just did it then. So, and it was about the punctuation. It was really about getting the consonants and the vowels out in this language and using it to express the emotions of it. And then from that get the context and breath. So that's kind of how I learned it, or became aware of it.
Yeah, so it becomes an actor's tool in a lot of ways, a teaching tool for, we always use this phrase like an on-ramp to Shakespeare. It's kind of, it's not character-based, but it is the text. It is an iambic. It's a strong beat. So we'll kind of guide people there. Alana, I love your story. Can you share your story with us, how you came to know the sonnets?
Although I don't know if I told you about the sonnets. I told you about we did elevated text in university.
Yes, yeah.
Quickly, my introduction to the sonnet was in my first year of theater school. We all had to pick a sonnet and do it. But I was talking to Richard the other day about at the University of Calgary in the Drama 400, which is the third year class, there's a voice class every Friday. And Pamela Brooke, who was the professor, took us in the first semester from, everything was about getting to Shakespeare in the last year of school. So the first semester was about going from outer life to inner life. So we would have to pick a public speech that was done or published, some public speech. Then we moved to a published letter. Then we moved to a published diary entry. And then the second semester, we went from John Donne's The Good Morrow all the way through the decades of poetry to teach us elevated text. But yeah, my initial touch with the sonnet was actually my first year, where we picked one, but it was like the journey towards elevated text for us was really slow. But we were always focused on Shakespeare because our professor was a Stratford actress for many, many years.
That's right, yeah.
She was in, I can't remember which production she was in with Brian Bedford. She had a lead in one of the biggies opposite him. Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. Lou, what about your first experience with the sonnets?
You know, honestly, I think my very first experience was just reading them in English. I think in high school English. And my recollection was it was probably just part of like a greater poetry unit. So really focused on, you know, the rhyming scheme and that kind of thing, and sort of the context of poetry. So it didn't really come to life. It was just sort of more, you know, part of the reading curriculum. But I think my very first sort of really intensive kind of experience, again, was in theater school. I went to like a conservatory program, so we did voice for, it seemed like in the first year, it seemed like 85 hours a day, because it was rigorous work. But we worked on sonnets in that class, and we actually spent a long time on our sonnets. And you know, it's a fairly short piece of text, and it, you know, but we delved into it. We tried it a million ways. We worked on so much detail, the breath, the punctuation. So it really became sort of part of you, and we worked on it for quite some time. So it was, yeah, it was an amazing experience.
That's cool. Yeah, the deep dive into the work of the sonnets. I mean, we won't get to a lot of that stuff tonight, just simply because, you know, we want to make it, I really want to make this sort of an active process. Paul, how about you? How did you come to the
So similar to some of the others in some of my drama classes, but I sort of got them as sort of an adjunct to Shakespeare's plays. They were kind of like poems. But my first real experience with sonnet was actually not in a Shakespeare play. It was a play by Moliere, The Misanthrope. Is anybody familiar with that play?
Yeah, of course.
There's a great character in that I played. His name was Oran, and he's the best friend to the misanthrope, and he performs this sonnet. I don't know if anybody knows. You're nodding, Alana, if you know this character, but he performs this sonnet in the play. It's just called Sonnet. So I have a big long red wig on, and it's like the world's worst sonnet. It's like the worst sonnet ever written, and it's just called Sonnet. So I get out there and I say sonnet 2 or 3 times, and then I perform this sonnet, which I think is like up there with Shakespeare's best, but it's actually horrible. So it has the audience really laughing. And I just keep saying sonnet as I'm performing the sonnet. I thought it was like hysterical in that play.
Yeah, that's so funny because Shakespeare really uses the sonnets in a lot of the comedies, right? In Two Gentlemen of Verona, there's reference to the sonnets. Love's Labour Lost, there is. And in particular, there's one which I'm just going to read. It appears in Romeo and Juliet, and it's literally Romeo and Juliet building this sonnet in the balcony scene. And I'll just read these 14 lines. If I profane with my unworthiest hand this holy shrine, the gentle fine is this: My lips, two blushing pilgrims ready stand to smooth that rough touch with a tender kiss. Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Have not saints lips and holy palmers too? Aye, pilgrim lips that they must use in prayer. Oh then, dear saint, let lips do what hands do. They pray, grant thou, lest faith turn to despair. Saints do not move, though grant for prayer's sake. Then move not, while my prayer's effect I take. So you can see that Romeo and Juliet, they're so connected in the musicality of what they have to say. And that's really the first place that I think I was made aware of what a sonnet was and where a sonnet kind of existed was in the fiber of Romeo and Juliet and in this play. And it really, it really gives you a great sense of the rhythm of it, the musicality that's kind of built into it. So for the next 45 minutes, why don't we'll work like one sonnet, we'll start and then we'll kind of work our way through, again, with no real performance goal here, more of a deep dive kind of exploration of what we're saying. Anyone want to go first? Or second, because technically I just went.
I'll go. Let me grab,
Sure.
let me go
Sure.
right over to 138.
And how did you come to this sonnet? How did you choose this sonnet?
I like it. I've always liked this sonnet, is actually it. And I think that it's, well, I'll read it and then we can talk about why.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. Thus, vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best, simply I credit her false speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her, and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be.
That's great.
Nice.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't know. It's that sort of, like we were talking about this the other day, like this sort of love is blind thing where like our flaws don't matter,
Yeah.
And we don't speak of those things with one we love.
Yeah.
Those aren't the truth.
Yeah. I also love the fact that there's a maturity to the love. There's that sense of, I've been around the block, even though she might not endow me with that. But I know that people lie, and she knows how old I am. Like there's this sort of, we go into this with our eyes wide open, but it doesn't matter what we see.
Yes.
I
also like just the constant play on truth and lies in it. Like it's very playful language about belief and lie, but also I love the double entendres in it. Like I lie with her and she with me.
Yeah.
There's something there, but it's all it's about kind of not. Like, yeah, I know I've been around. We're not going to talk about that. And I just, over the last few years, I sort of went from being the younger person in a relationship to all of a sudden being an older woman. And I just like, that's weird for me. And so this sort of hit me that way because I can't, I'm shocked when somebody is like, oh, I like older women. And I'm like, me?
Maybe I should introduce you to some.
Like, that's my mom. Is the mature woman. I'm not the mature, so there's something in that resonates for me at this point too.
There's a lovely tactic for those that may be listening or maybe even looking at performing a sonnet. If initially you read it and you don't understand it, if you read the last word in every sentence, it's really quite extraordinary. Alana, could you just do that for us? Could you just read
Sure.
the last word?
Yeah, the last word of each line.
Yeah.
Truth, lies, youth, subtleties. No, subtleties. Young, best, tongue, suppressed, unjust, old, trust, told, me, be.
Oh, that's great. I knew that.
Yeah.
Kind of, it acts as a bit of a, if you were, if an actor was kind of thinking maybe to do this, that kind of helps you a little bit, doesn't it?
That's great. I have never done that. I love that.
Gives you, it's one of those great things, and it works so well with the sonnets because they're such compact, amazing poems. That's great. I love that. Did you feel that obviously the technical design of a sonnet is that it's 3 quatrains of 4 lines and then a rhyming couplet at the end?
Mm-hmm.
So we get those 3 little pieces in the quatrain. Then there's the thing which I love in Italian. It's called the volta, the turn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right before the rhyming couplet. And I think it really, those last 2 lines kind of really clarify the position or the point of each one of the sonnets. Could you do it for us again? That was great.
Sure. One more time with different feeling.
Yeah.
When my love swears that she is made of truth, I do believe her, though I know she lies, that she might think me some untutored youth, unlearned in the world's false subtleties. Thus, vainly thinking that she thinks me young, although she knows my days are past the best. Simply I credit her false-speaking tongue. On both sides thus is simple truth suppressed. But wherefore says she not she is unjust? And wherefore say not I that I am old? Oh, love's best habit is in seeming trust, and age in love loves not to have years told. Therefore I lie with her and she with me, and in our faults by lies we flattered be.
That's great. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's super clear, and it takes it away from heightened poetry and something that you have to bow to something that becomes, really universal and really something that we can connect to. Well,
and I think this one for me, one of the reasons I like it too is I find this one is easier to speak. I feel like for me anyway, I feel like the lines read like a little more conversationally, whereas a lot of the other sonnets, including the other one I'll do later, is they're more poetic in that regard, like are more little more challenging for me. This one, I feel the conversation of it. I feel like I could say this and not have to do much to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't feel like you need to to present it in a way to really kind of lay it out. It's very it
feels like an admission or like a confession, sort of like a when my love does this thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I know she lies, but like it's got that feel, and I think it's really set up that way. Like it's not a stretch to do it that way.
Yes.
No. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you. Who wants to go next?
I'll go.
Paul. Excellent.
Okay. I'll do 130 because that kind of goes with this a little bit.
130.
Yeah, I was going to do 18 first, but since Alana did this, I think I'll do 130 first. You know that
Sure.
one? Okay.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Sonnet 130. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked red and white, but no such rose see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground. And yet by heaven, I think my love is rare, as any she belied with false compare.
That's great. What was it that drew you to this one?
Well, the other one I did is 18, which we all know, Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day, which is, they both, I'll talk about both a little bit, but mainly this one, they both use nature as a way to compare whoever they're speaking about. I know there's some in 18, whether it's to a young man or a woman, and we can interpret it however we wish. This one, 130, I think because he uses the so many forms of nature, the sun and coral and snow and blah 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 and all this, and he, for most of it until the Volta, is basically not making a very favorable comparison. He's going with beauty, but he's basically saying, she has stinky breath and her breasts are kind of a weird color, gray, not white. And, her lips are not that great and her eyes are nothing like the sun. And then in the end, he says, but I still love her for who she is, basically.
Yeah.
All these parts of beauty, and she doesn't really have those, but I still really love her. So that's what drew me to it. I think it's a very interesting way that he portrays somebody.
Mhm.
Especially Shakespeare taking the poetry out of his own poetry.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, no, this isn't the sun. It isn't roses. It isn't this. It isn't that. I've talked about that already.
And she's got black wires coming out of her head, and her breath reeks, and it's not like perfume, and there's no rosiness in her cheeks. And then he sort of goes through this whole thing, and in the end, it's like, I think what he's saying, besides I love her for who she's with, it's almost like, I don't know if my interpretation might be a little off, but comparing it to the other one, I'm going to do 18, he's sort of saying, all these other poets make these big lofty comparisons. It's like you're the most beautiful woman on earth and this and that. And that's false comparison, because I love her for who she is. My love is rare for her. And it's nothing compared to these poets that build their women or men or whoever up in these lofty standards.
Yeah.
Well, I just hit on the compare part from what's going to be the other one that you're doing.
Mhm.
That there are comparisons throughout.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's
Right,
almost a
true.
distinguishment between romantic love and true love in a way.
Mhm.
Not that romantic love isn't true
Mhm.
necessarily, but that sort of notion of that young romantic notion of what someone looks like and sounds
Mhm.
like versus who they really are, and that deeper love that comes from just recognizing who they are and loving them for that.
She walks on the
Exactly.
ground,
Mhm.
my mistress walks on the ground.
Yeah, she's not like a god, I think she meant with that line about the goddess, almost like an angel flying up. No, she's just tromping along on the ground like everybody else.
Yeah.
She's real.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the Volta and the turn on line 12, I love that there's almost a tenderness of that description. The first 12 lines are basically, this is everything that's wrong with her.
Mhm.
And then, but you know what? That's what I love. And I think that Shakespeare speaks to that love, and this sounds so cliche, but that love is love, right?
Mhm.
It literally quite literally is in the eye of the beholder. But
Right.
Yeah. Why don't you do 18 and we'll kind of dovetail it
Okay.
with what you've.
All right. So now we'll do 18, which I'm sure most of us know.
Number 18, yes, one of the most popular, if not
Sonnet
the most
18.
popular sonnet. But hey, that's every reason to do it, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometimes too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometime declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest. Nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe or eyes can see, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's nicely done. It's a tricky one. Why do you think this is one of the most famous sonnets? I open that to everybody.
I think it's my person. I think that first line, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? There's something catchy about that. I don't know. And it just all the, the comparisons and the imagery and how he quickly goes into, even though you think a summer's day, you think all these beautiful thoughts about it, he's bringing up, the wind blowing the buds off and how short it lasts, and all of those things before he sort of immortalizes whoever he's writing this to. And I wonder, I read this a number of times to myself to try to figure out, is he really immortalizing whoever he's writing this to or for, or is he immortalizing himself in his own poetry and sonnets and words?
Huh.
I don't know. I saw it both ways. I kind of saw it both ways. So I'm not sure what you guys think.
It's a really thoughtful pairing, these two, like really thoughtful, hearing them back to back. But going to what Richard was saying about why is this one famous? It's the first line for sure, but I really think it's because it speaks to kind of the romantic cliche. It's like, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? It's very cliche love poetry to start, but it's knowingly. Like, I think there's a cheek in there.
Yeah.
Too. I could, but that's easy. And that's where my Mistress Eyes goes too. I could say all these great things, but that's easy. That's the lowest hanging fruit. It's much more difficult to actually compare my real love for you.
And I think even though this one traditionally is, true love, and so many people know this and say it, it's really the other one, that 130, that's really about true love.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you never hear that one really recited very often.
You don't. No, you certainly don't. I'm just looking at the last word in every sentence. Can you just read that, Paul, in 18?
Sure.
The last word of every sentence.
Okay.
Of every line, I'm sorry.
Okay, here we go. Okay. Day, temperate, May, date, shines, dimmed, declines, untrimmed, fade, oast, shade, gross, see, thee. It's interesting. I'm going to do that now for all of these, Richard.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, you see the evolution from light to dark.
Yeah.
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 From the spring of May to sort of the darkness of winter kind of thing. I do like that comment you had, Alana, about it being a little cheeky, because I think one of the things about the sonnet as a form is it was considered sort of the ultimate love poetry. And it's hard to imagine us as, like, in the modern era, we don't really think of that's how you court someone, that's how you get somebody to like you, is to write them love poetry. But that was, that was the way people communicated with each other.
Yeah.
And
I think
that idea, the popular thing to do was to write a sonnet,
Yeah, that shall I compare thee to summer's day just feels like roses are red, violets are blue.
Yeah.
Like, it's got that to it. But also, I
Yeah.
think he's touching on all the seasons too here. You know, summer's day, the darling buds of May.
Mhm.
Oh no, it's mostly summer and spring. Never mind.
Bring I think you're right. I think
Right, right. You know, he doesn't,
death.
when he
Yeah.
talks about the sun, he says either the sun's sometimes too hot or it's sometimes clouded over, as opposed to a beautiful sunny day. He doesn't go there. It's
Mhm.
interesting.
And then the
Yeah.
Yeah.
eternal
Into the
summer.
summer, but he looks at not really the negative aspects of summer, but not sort of the what you think the roses are red, violets are
Yeah.
blue kind of a
The
thing.
realism of summer.
Mhm.
almost. Huh.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. GT, do you want to? I love the choice that you've made for your sonnet. This is really extraordinary. Which one are you going to do again?
I guess, well, I guess I'll do the sonnet 127, just to thinking about Paul's sonnet, the first one he did, which is, yeah.
Sure. So sonnet 100.
Or I could do either one actually. It doesn't matter. But
Whichever. Yeah, do 127. Let's do that.
okay. In the old age, black was not counted fair, or if it were, it bore not beauty's name. But now is black beauty's successive heir, and beauty slandered with a bastard shame. For since each hand hath put on nature's power, faring the foul with art's false borrowed face, sweet beauty hath no name, no holy bower, but is profane, if not lives in disgrace. Therefore my mistress' eyes are raven black, her eyes so suited, and they, mourners seem at such who, not born fair, no beauty lack, slandering creation with a false esteem. Yet so they mourn, becoming of their woe, that every tongue says beauty should look so.
Nice.
Nice.
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever heard that sonnet.
Well, I've never heard that
I
one
haven't
either.
either.
Nope.
No,
What
right
a
aloud.
great choice.
Yeah, thanks. I'm
And
I
so,
write.
yeah, how did you choose it?
Well, as I was saying in the beginning, like, I'm not like that familiar with the sonnets in the sense that I look at them at all. So I started scrolling through the sonnets, and I just started, process of like what really hit me. And when I heard the first line, "In the old age, black was not counted fair," my wife is black, and the time we're living in right now is very interesting with regards to black, and all things black, and all things color. So I thought, okay, and I just read it, and yeah, it hit me in a way. I just felt it. I just felt it, but and then I just started looking at it more, and I'm like, oh wait, what's he really saying here? And I think that's kind of, I think that's like the beauty for me of Shakespeare, because it's like, you're talking about the words, and how many times does he use the word fair in this? And how many meanings does the word fair have?
Yeah.
And what was the other word? Love and loss, and there's and I also think he plays on words like esteem and seem, like mourners seem, and the word see is in seem in that, and he's using eyes in that sentence. So it's just interesting to me, like how much he loves words, and how he knows how to play with your emotions in this, because even reading it now, I couldn't help but feel a certain way in it after, especially once he started getting into like the fifth line for, when he talks about women and the false borrowed face. And we just did Hamlet, and Hamlet has that line,
Mhm.
God has given you one face and you make yourselves another. And I think
That's right. Yeah.
it's that idea of his ideas of beauty, which when Paul did his, I was just like, oh, that's so interesting how he used, he played with beauty in a way in that, saying what is ugly is beautiful actually. And here it's the opposite. It's how we can make ugly beautiful by painting.
Fearing the foul.
That which we consider ugly is actually just beautiful in nature. So it's,
And it's interesting how he's using fair as a verb in this poem, because in 18, he uses the line every fair from fair, to use beauty as a noun, and he's using it as I'm looking at it in my sonnet book, fairing the foul. It's interesting how he uses it.
And actually in
which is
131,
in, as we talked about the Scottish play of,
fair is foul and foul is fair.
Right.
So it's really, so I thought, let me look at this deeper. And you can just look at it for a long time and be like, what?
Yeah, and isn't it something that the immediacy of those words, GT, the discovery that you had, that the fifth word in that sonnet, the resonance that word has nowadays is so incredibly different than it would have been 20, 50, 100, 200 years ago.
Right, and it stops. It's a was it a plosive? I forget. The K stops it. So you have to say that word. You cannot run through that. It doesn't allow it.
And I love how it starts in the old age.
Yeah.
Years ago.
Yeah.
And he puts a comma there. Or there is a comma there. So it's that's one. Here's another. And then how he puts black and beauty together. It's just, and then of course I had to peek the last word of each line. I was like, wow, that's pretty damn interesting also.
Yeah, I just looked at it too.
Right.
Isn't that? Can you read the last word of each line for us?
Sure. Fair, name, air, shame, power, face, bower, disgrace, black, seem, lack, esteem, woe. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's hip hop.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, it is. It absolutely is.
So it's so current in what I'm saying, essentially.
Definitely.
That's what I got off of it right away as soon as I started reading it.
One of the things, and I'm curious to know whether you guys did this or not in your preparation, but one of the things that Richard and I spoke about when we were working on sonnets was, Rich said, well, don't worry about what the Arden, I'm looking at the Arden version, or don't worry about what somebody else says the sonnet means. Just what does it mean to you? And I think this one's a great example of that, because I have when I look at it in the Arden, there's quite an intellectual, explanation for what this means. And I had, like I said, I wasn't familiar with the sonnet. And as soon as you spoke it, it was very powerful, but it's not at all, it made me feel something entirely different than the way, the intellectual sort of interpretation is set out. So I think it's interesting just to allow it to kind of affect you rather than figure out, what does this mean? What did somebody else think it meant? It's what does it mean to you in the moment?
And it was funny. That's exactly what happened to me. It was, I'm reading it and I'm just like, no, it doesn't mean that. I'm sorry. I'm not saying it that. I know, because you can. And I guess in many ways, and I think that's the beauty of it in the sense that we can all interpret. And it's, going to the, sonnet 18 that Paul just did, I couldn't help but think of Romeo and Juliet and the journey that they have in that, where it's beautiful and then it just ends. And it's not that beautiful,
Yeah.
And there was so much romance in that. And then, so in this, it's just interesting how he just, what one person says doesn't necessarily mean that to you, or it's how we feel it and receive it also.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think that, you know, as we've all sort of, you know, when we talk in rehearsals, we've all been affected by teachers that kind of took the playbook or the rule book and sort of said, we're putting that to the side. What do you think this means? How do you feel? And I think that, if I might be so bold as to say, I think that that was Shakespeare's intent.
Yeah.
Shakespeare's intent was that these things came with us, that we're not having to blow them off, that blow the dust off and go, oh my gosh, this crazy thing. It has an immediacy. And it's not just, as you guys have said, it's not just because of this one editor 60 years ago thought that this sonnet meant this thing. No, it can't. It can't. And great literature and great art evolve, doesn't it? It sort of comes with us on this journey, which
Exactly.
I really love. No, that's great. What was the other sonnet that you had, GT? Want to share that one with us?
Sure. It is Sonnet 42.
We actually never talked about, just before we go on, line 9, therefore my mistress eyes. We're back to mistress eyes again. There's that connective tissue that we're starting to find just gently between these. Completely out of order, completely, 20, 30, 40 apart. But I love that. It's just that, no better word, I think, than connective tissue. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So do the next one?
Yeah. Which
Okay.
one? What one are you going to do next?
Sonnet 42.
42.
Okay.
Cool. Great. Whenever you're ready.
That thou hast her, it is not all my grief, and yet it may be said I loved her dearly. That she hath thee is of my wailing chief, a loss in love that touches me more nearly. Loving offenders, thus will I excuse ye. Thou dost love her because thou know'st I love her, and for my sake even so doth she abuse me, suffering my friend for my friend's sake to approve her. If I lose thee, my loss is my love's gain. And losing her, my friend hath found that loss. Both find each other, and I lose both twain. And both for my sake lay on me this cross. But here's the joy. My friend and I are one. Sweet flattery. Then she loves but me alone.
Nice.
Yeah, interesting, right?
We had a great chat about this, didn't we? When we talked about it, GT.
We did, and it's. I think this one. It's one of those that I could have a chat with myself about this for a while, because there's so many layers in this, and it's, and in this one it's that rhyming, the couplet at the end, and you're just like, wait, what? It just paused me and kept making me rethink this whole thing. And
yeah.
And even now it did. I was like, So
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah,
we won't talk about the specifics of the story that you told, but it's wonderful how Shakespeare can do that, can activate in us an allegorical story that goes, you know what? I kind of know what this situation is about. And you somehow get invested in it in a different way than you never imagined that perhaps you would.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and even looking at it before I came on, I was just like, oh, that's what this is. So it just keeps changing. But again, this was one of those, I think there was a few that like, oh, look at these. And when it hit me, I read it and I thought, oh no, I can't do this one. And then I read it again. I was like, no, and then for me, it's when I have to keep coming back to something and keep saying, nah, not this one. I skimmed through them and then I picked, and I just kept coming back to this one. I'm like, why this one? And it's just amazing. I sometimes think, like, what was he going through that made him write this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is not fun.
No, and line
No.
6 is so unpleasant, isn't it? Thou
Yeah.
dost love her because thou knowest I love her.
Mhm.
Wow, what an amazingly articulate way to say that.
Yeah.
And unless I have a typo in my edition, is there an exclamation point in that last line?
Yeah, sweet
Flattery.
sweet flattery. Yeah.
Isn't that one of the, he rarely uses exclamation points. Is there a reason for that? I was just curious.
Oh, I think that, well, GT, well,
I mean, there's
talked-
always a reason, but GT, what do you think?
there's, no, go ahead. There's almost that realization, that kind of, oh, yes, kind of realization there, you know?
Sweet flattery.
Sweet flattery.
Flattery.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so loaded. It's strange because in this cup, I was like, ooh, I didn't go where he wants you to go. For me, when I read, this, I mean, I think it's not sweet flattery. It's kind of that bittersweet from,
Yeah,
like,
Yeah.
this is my flattery that, my friend and I are one. We're the same person. You're basically going to leave me for my friend who is exactly like me. Therefore, I should be flattered.
Well, in flattery, the use of flattery is not ever like a completely 100% positive thing.
Exactly.
So that sweet flattery is like, that's sweet. You're talking sweetly to me, but there's something about it.
And
It
and
hurt.
maybe he's flattering himself a little bit too. Because to
Mhm.
me, I heard when you said that, I thought, oh, the only way you can kind of make yourself feel better is to go, well, she actually still does love me because we're basically the same person.
Mhm.
And that is kind of flattering yourself, right? It's kind of saying, well, that's, maybe it's not as bad. It's finding a way to make it not as bad as it is.
Yeah, it's like comforting yourself.
Well, yeah. And
Yeah.
the one I did with flattery was part of it as well. That in our
Yeah.
faults by lies, we flattered B, it's like, yeah, we're sitting here basking in our flattery.
No, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, that's great. Two really lovely choices. And yeah, and I love it when actors get sonnets by the scruff of the neck and we put them through the ringer. I love that.
Mhm.
I think it activates them in ways that audiences haven't seen.
Mhm.
It's very easy to read these things and just hit the rhyming couplet and it sounds kind of Dr. Seuss-esque, doesn't it? But when it's activated by, what you guys bring to it, that passion, that real kind of connection to the text, it just changes it and it just takes it somewhere else, which is just so lovely.
Yeah.
Great. Lou, do you want to do one?
Sure. Do you have a preference which one I do first?
No, whichever one you like.
Okay, well, I'm going to do 90, which is, one I'm very familiar with because I spent a lot of time with it. But what kind of struck me when I was looking at it again after, leaving it for, quite frankly, many years, other than, occasionally remembering it or reading it, it just reminded me of this, I think it's a Robertson Davies quote where he said, you should read a book at different stages in your life, because at each stage, it will mean something different to you. And I thought about when I first did this sonnet in theater school, the impact it had on me and my sort of perspective on life was so different than it is now. And so I thought that was just really interesting. It felt just very different to look at it with my eyes now versus how many years ago when I looked at it the first time. So anyway, I'll share it and then
Cool.
excuse me. Then hate me when thou wilt, if ever now, while the world is bent my deeds to cross. Join with the spite of fortune, make me bow, and do not drop in for an after loss. Do not. When my heart hath scaped this sorrow, come in the rearward of a conquered woe. Give not a windy night a rainy morrow to linger out a purposed overthrow. If thou wilt leave me, do not leave me last when other petty griefs have done their spite. But in the onset come, so shall I taste at first the very worst of fortune's might. And further strains of woe which now seem woe, compared with loss of thee, will not seem so.
Nice. Yeah, so we leave love, and now we go to hate, which is incredibly powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, I really changed the tone here. Yeah, and it's interesting because when I first did this, I think I was a kind of an angrier person. Everything in the world there was so much injustice, and I was just fired up by that all the time. And not that I don't care about injustice now. I mean, my whole life is kind of devoted to trying to find it, but it's just different. And I think there was more anger when I first did this work versus now. And so that word hate to me doesn't have the same bite that it did back then. To me, this has more sadness in it now.
Interesting. I'm just looking at the last word of each sentence. Could you read that, of each line? Could you read that for us?
Sure. Now, cross, bow, loss, sorrow, woe, morrow, overthrow, last, spite, taste, might, woe, so.
It's a real tug of war, isn't there, going on in the language?
Bow, loss, sorrow, woe. There's a lot of woe in it.
Sad.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Sorrow.
yeah, and quite a lot of repetition.
And do not drop in for an after loss. Do not.
And the spite of fortune, the spite.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Like-
now, woe and woe. It feels,
There's a lot of O sounds: overthrow, morrow, sorrow, woe.
yeah, it almost feels like you're crying, or
It is moans. It's a moan.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
If ever now, bow, sorrow, woe.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It was one of the things you asked me, Rich, when we were working on this, is you said, what do you dread? What is the speaker? What do they dread? And that was a really powerful question, because, you can interpret that however you want, but there is that, to me, there was the dread of being left, the dread of being alone, the dread of not having someone to. It feels like this is a person who's in a lot of pain for many different reasons. And then to think of losing someone at the same time just sort of adds to it. So it's not a maybe it's a desperation, but it has a really, it's a very different tone than all of the others that we've done tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
definitely.
And equally as powerful, and equally as determined, and as there's a ferocity that we found in these sonnets that we've chosen so far tonight. It's I remember looking at this when I was in theater school as well, and just kind of, wow, it just felt like it was such a great valve, 14 lines of just wow. But you're right, as you look at it as you get older, there's a sadness and a pain that rises more than the anger ever did now, which is great. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think we have 2 sonnets left. Alana, do you want to go now? And
Yeah,
then
I think mine's 94, so I'm right in this.
Oh, you're right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, good.
fantastic.
Let's see how the story turned out.
What happened?
Happened next. Okay, 94. They that have power to hurt and will do none, that do not do the thing they most do show, who, moving others, are themselves as stone, unmoved, cold, and to temptation slow. They rightly do inherit heaven's graces and husband nature's riches from expense. They are the lords and owners of their faces, others but stewards of their excellence. The summer's flowers to the summer's sweet, though to itself it only live and die. But if that flower with base infection meet, the basest weed outbraves his dignity. For sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds. Lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds.
Nice. Yeah.
And I will say, like, my attraction to this probably came from working on Hamlet, because when we talked about it, there is this line about the things rank, and this is an unweeded garden that grows to seed, things rank and gross in nature.
Possess them merely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's something in that. And then also in this one gives me another Shakespearean character, which is also from the beginning. I get a little bit of Quality of Mercy from Portia and Merchant of Venice, with this, the power to hurt and will do none. That is what becomes the throned monarch better than his crown in the Quality of Mercy speech.
Mm-hmm.
Is to sit mercy above that power and strength. But there is something here about, being reserved. There's a reservation in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
That is interesting. This one, I don't fully understand this one necessarily, except to say that it moves me in some way.
Yeah.
It seems like a few different pieces to me that I haven't quite fit together yet, but it takes me on a journey.
Well, we found something really interesting, Alana, didn't we? Is
Yeah.
it one period?
There's one period. Yeah, like the first 6 lines are, or actually we don't get the full sentence. The full first sentence
Yeah.
is it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines.
So the first 2 quatrains have been squeezed into one thought.
Yeah, and there's only 1 semicolon, and that's 6 lines in.
Yeah.
So I mean, if we speed it up, it's like, it really is like there's 3 sentences here.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah, which really
And it really isn't like the flower. Like, I get the second part, like the summer's flower, the sweetest things turn sourest by their deeds, but the beginning is really complex.
Yeah.
What do you get from that last line, that lilies that fester smell far worse than weeds?
Well, it really is like true. It's like there is like weeds are just weeds. You know what I mean? They don't sour necessarily.
Yeah.
They like, weeds keep growing.
Mm-hmm.
These beautiful flowers keep die.
Yeah.
There's something in that, like, and I think that speaks to a lot of where it goes in these latter sonnets, where there's that summer turns, like, things fall off, and lilies, being like a funeral flower sometimes, they do smell really badly.
Yeah.
When they start to go.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just read the last
Words?
Yeah, please.
None show stone slow, graces expense, faces excellence, sweet die, meet dignity, deeds weeds. Yeah.
I love the antithesis he creates. See, Rich, I'm always using your words now. We must spend a lot of time.
Yeah.
I love that he sets up this idea that, people who are stoic and powerful and don't show their emotions, are seen as being, next to God sort of thing, and important and excellent.
Yeah.
But really, at the end of the day, when they go, they really go. Versus, the people who, just kind of are themselves and the weeds, so to speak.
Yeah.
They
Well,
don't fall as far. It's like the person who's up there on that pedestal has a very long fall from grace.
Yeah.
Versus the average person doesn't have very far to fall and doesn't have as great a fall.
It reminds me a lot of Measure for Measure, of what Isabella says to Angelo. She says, that it's one thing to have a giant's power, but it's another thing to use it, right? It's this whole idea of that haunting, that first line, they that have power to hurts and will do none. There's, whoa, the immediacy of that in the world that we're living in right now is extraordinary for me.
There's also another Hamlet bit for me, is like in the scene right before the ghost comes with Horatio, where talking about how one small defect can be the thing one is judged on versus all the beautiful, wonderful things they do. But that one bit of complexion, that one stamp of defect could be the thing. And here it is as well, right? It's this sort of idea that it's if that flower with base infection meet, the basest weed outbraves his dignity.
Yeah.
It's the same idea. And it's just neat to see how he plays with these ideas constantly, like concepts of time, concepts of these antitheses, like old and young,
live and die. Yeah.
And high status and low status, a king and a peasant, a clown, a fool.
Yeah. That's great. Lou, I guess you're last but not least.
Grand finale.
Grand finale.
Grand finale. What number are you gonna do?
Do the music. 56. So kind of close to the second one that GT did. Sweet love, renew thy force. Be it not said thy edge should blunter be than appetite, which but today by feeding is allayed, tomorrow sharpened in his former might. So love be thou, although today thou fill thy hungry eyes, even till they wink with fullness, tomorrow see again, and do not kill the spirit of love with a perpetual dullness. Let this sad interim, like the ocean be which parts the shore, where two contracted new come daily to the banks, that when they see return of love, more blessed may be the view. Or call it winter, which being full of care makes summer's welcome thrice more wished, more rare.
Nice job. This sonnet uses a punctuation, kind of what am I trying to say? How it's written on the page. There's a period mid sentence in two sentences there in the first line, and then in the fifth line. So the start of the first quatrain and then the start of the second quatrain. So there is that kind of boom, 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 that kind of shift of gear, that little sort of hiccup, which I really like.
Yeah, this one I hadn't really read it before, maybe except in passing, and it just, I don't know, it just kind of appealed to me, I think, because of the idea that, what you see right now and maybe you don't see with love, you kind of see darkness, you kind of see winter in that person or that moment. If you wait that love will reappear. That time, that the ocean will come in, and winter will dissolve to summer, and just this idea that even those feelings towards somebody or those feelings towards the moment aren't forever.
Yeah.
And you mustn't forget that there was goodness there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think the theme that we've found tonight on a lot of the sonnets is time, isn't it?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Time seems to be that Shakespearean thing that he fights against and struggles with, and it's ever present in all of his work, and especially in this one. I love that line. And do not kill the spirit of love with a perpetual dullness. It's like this wonderful kind of warning.
Yeah.
Just so you know, can you just read the last word on each sentence?
Said, appetite, allayed, might, fullness, kill, dullness, be, new, see, view, care, wished, rare.
Nice.
That one really speaks when you read those last.
Yeah, it does. It just becomes a different way in of looking at it.
Those last words actually in the beginning seem like their own poem, like said appetite allayed might, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Might
Yeah.
kill fullness, kill dullness, be new. It really reads like a poem.
Very much so. And it also reads like those little pieces, those fragments that we get. Sweet love, renew thy force. So love, be thou.
Yeah, and like so many commas in one little sentence.
Yeah.
Love, like there's so much punctuation there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of punctuation in this. I also love the line, thy hungry eyes, even till they wink with fullness, tomorrow see again. And do not kill the spirit of love with a perpetual dullness. I love that notion that, you see so much in a day that you as you fall asleep, it's because you're so full of everything you've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You wink with fullness. It's like you're blinking. It's like that, those tired, like if you've ever seen a baby sort of falling asleep, like that sort of heavy eye. And then in
those
the morning,
eyes that at the beginning and then filled.
yeah, they're filled so much, and then they rest and they see again. And I loved the sort of theme of renewal. And once again he goes to nature and just the cycles and the seasons and the natural world, and how the ocean comes in and it goes out, and the winter dissolves to spring to summer. Like there's always like a yin and a yang. There's times when we're asleep and dull and bleak, and then there's times when we're full of life and new life and freshness and flowers. And so I love that. I think right now, especially because it's such an unrelenting life, it kind of spoke to me, that notion that maybe if we just sort of trust in the seasons, that we will come into a new one that's not winter anymore.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Well, thank you guys. What a thrill to work, and I love this idea that we can share our work and our process a little bit about how we do what we do. And as I said earlier, I love it when actors can grab the sonnets by the scruff of the neck and go, no, you know what? You're gonna mean what I want you to mean tonight, or we're gonna find the relevancy, or we're just gonna explore this text. I love that. I really, really do. Yeah. Any final thoughts? Maybe we'll do this again. We'll wait and hear what our feedback is. And it was a real pleasure and a real treat to work with you guys. I love it, and it's often the highlight of the week. These these times.
So
So
this is great. This is,
yeah,
I mean, I forget how rich the sonnets are and how relevant it is to now, you know,
Yeah.
or whenever it is you pick it up and whatever it is you read, it's relevant.
yeah,
Yeah. 100%.
yeah. No, absolutely.
That's what's really amazing, how relevant it is to today, being written hundreds of years ago. We read these words and it's like all these emotions and feelings, thoughts.
Yeah, and nothing's really changed, has it?
No, the inner workings are still complex, you know, and then yet everything's as simple as ever.
Yeah,
Too. Like it
Yeah.
really is that. And we only, no matter what, we're still competing with time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That's all we have.
yeah,
And
Mhm.
Yeah.
yeah. That's our great ally, I suppose, that follows us through this life, that shakes and explores so much. So
Foe, ally,
yeah, there you go. But no, thank you guys. Thank you
Thanks,
so
Rich.
much.
Thank you.
And we'll do let's do Troilus and Cressida next week, shall we? If you're into it.
Why not?
Excellent. Sounds great, guys. Well, have a wonderful evening, and thank you so much for sharing your work.
Thank you, Richard. All you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
we'll talk very soon. Thanks, guys.
Night.
Good night.
Take care.